Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to cover fields, the different kinds of fields, and what kinds of assignments you can assign to them. Now, before we get into our discussion on fields, we have to learn about 8 important data types known as primitives. So primitives are these special kinds of data types that have been predefined in the Java language and are identified by a reserved keyword. So if you're wondering what that means, you can think of it as, and I mean this in a isn't a perfect analogy, but you can think of it as the alphabet in a language. The characters in the language are set and you use them to create sentences. In the same way, there's a finite set of primitives that have been created in the Java language that you can use in your programs. And because there's a finite set of these primitives, there are rules for using them, including stuff like default values and sizes. I have provided these in this table you see here. In addition to these 8 primitives, there's also the string type. Now, the string type isn't a primitive, but it's treated kind of like one because of all the support the Java language gives it, including the primitive-like ability to create a string by simply enclosing a group of characters between two quotation marks. I'll go more into depth on strings and their rules in the string video. So I covered primitives pretty quickly, but don't think that means that they aren't important, because they are extremely important. It's just there's not much to them besides what you see on this table. I would highly recommend that you take the time to memorize the default values for each primitive, as well as their min and max values. This will help you choose the appropriate primitive type when assigning fields. Okay, so now that we've covered primitives, let's cover some terminology. Some books and some people will use the term variable when talking about a field or vice versa. Now, since it's not incorrect to say either or, I'm going to use the term variable from now on since that's how I first learned it. Well, now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at 2 types of assignments you'll be able to make with variables. First, we have primitive assignments, which, as the name suggests, it's when a primitive is assigned to a variable. You can see that the syntax is really basic. You just give the access modifier, which describes the accessibility of the variable, the type, the name, and finally the value. You can see what the assignments will look like in the examples below. The other assignment is the object assignment. Now, with object assignments, you'll see that it's similar to a primitive assignment, kinda. The difference starts after the access modifier with the term class name. But the difference is just in the terminology because a class name is actually a type. It's a type of the object that's about to be created. Then we have the var name, which is the same. Then we get to the other side of the equal sign where you see the new keyword. Now, I'll make a separate video explaining what exactly the new keyword does, but for now, all you need to know is that the new keyword creates an instance of a class, and with the help of the constructor, initializes that instance. It all then gets assigned to the variable you just declared. You may have noticed by now that the new keyword isn't used when performing a primitive assignment. This is because, as I mentioned before, when I talked about primitives, primitive types are special data types built into the language. They are not actually objects created from a class. This distinction is important because primitives are taken at face value. What I mean by this is that primitives are fixed values represented in your code without requiring computation. These primitive values are also known as literals. Now, if you're looking at the last example, remember strings that are not technically primitives behave and follow the same rules as primitives for the most part. So just pretend they are primitives, but also know that they aren't. There's something I forgot to mention, but I'll mention it now. There's a list of names that you aren't allowed to use as variable names. These names are known as reserved words. The reason why you can't use these words is because they have already been allocated by Java to perform certain duties. If you look through them, you'll see some that look familiar, like int, float, and boolean. It would be confusing as well as impractical to call a variable int or int boolean. Now, you can look through them and get familiar with them, but it's not necessary to put in the work into memorizing them. If you're running in an IDE, You'll get an exception if you try to use one, telling you that you can't use a reserved word as a variable name. And over time, you'll just naturally learn them for normal use. Well, thank you guys for watching. Please let me know if you feel I missed anything or have any feedback that you think might make the videos better. Again, thanks for watching, and until next time, happy learning.